embodiment. I'm here in the redwoods of California with some big ass redwood trees, and I got a new friend online here with me, Shako from Mind's Eye Status, who is a social confidence and communications coach. Thank you so much for joining me, Shako. How are you, brother?
Good, Rose. Really excited to be here, brother. And I'm kind of jealous we don't have any epic redwoods here in Melbourne.
Yeah, we were just actually talking before, and Melbourne's actually one of my favorite cities I visited. It actually reminds me of my hometown, San Francisco. It's got a lot of very interesting and actually parallel uniquenesses to them that including Chinatowns. They're like the first and second oldest and biggest Chinatowns in the world. I don't know if you
Is that
knew
right?
that. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. There you go.
But I'm actually really excited to interview you, Shako, because I know you do a lot of amazing work helping people with the social confidence and communication. Before we dive into that, I'd love to hear a little bit of background of like your hero's journey and what even led you to coaching people in this space.
Yeah, definitely. So firstly, thank you for having me here. Rose, I really do appreciate it. As I was telling you before the call, I really do admire the work that you're doing. The embodiment work, I think it's absolutely crucial for the modern man, definitely, and women too. So a little bit of a backstory, long story short, because it does span about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to 10 years, so I graduated high school 10 years ago. Throughout high school, I was always the very fidgety, trying to be social kid that would try to make friends and would try to be extroverted, but it only came out as social awkwardness. So I always say I never had classic social anxiety. It was more social awkwardness. That's the best way that I can describe it, because I didn't have anxiety to talk to people. I could talk to people, but I would feel so awkward doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I couldn't, for that reason, I wouldn't and couldn't fit in with any social group. I would have friends for a very limited time, and then I would have to move to another friend group because I would essentially get rejected from that group.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with my dating life. It was always very, very brief romances, which didn't last because my authentic, insecure, needy self, awkward self would come to the surface. And that leaked into university a little bit as well. So after high school, in university, I noticed that I was having a similar reaction from people, which was quite painful, because leaving high school, I thought, okay, it's going to be different now. These people don't know me. And I can make friends with everybody, right? But turns out that the same habitual patterns of my behavior was actually what was causing those relationships to not come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
It was right after high school that I discovered the world of personal development.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, it was about communication coaching, some dating advice, all that sort of stuff. And when I found out that there is information out there that teaches you how to be more confident and more attractive and a better communicator, that honestly blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It really blew my mind, because I realized at that moment, it's like, wait a second, you're telling me that there is potential for people that felt like they were limited in their capacity to communicate, their capacity for confidence. But no, you can actually improve this. What? That was a huge realization for me. So I became obsessed with personal development, with reading books on communication, confidence, all sorts of personal development topics. And in fact, I actually left university to start sales because I wanted to really put myself out there, step out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, for the past 7-8 years, I've been promoted to sales manager, sales trainer, account manager at different firms, team leader, managerial positions, to the point where I completely made a 180, a complete transformation in the way that I communicate, in the way that I feel, and in my social life and my opportunities that come along with that.
Mm.
Hence, what led me to doing what I do now, which, as you mentioned, is social confidence and communication coaching. And here I am.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I'm curious, when you look at the people you work, and by the way, do you work with guys and girls or mostly guys?
Mostly men. I do have a few independent female clients from time to time.
Cool. What do you find to be like the biggest block that gets in the way of people just naturally being more confident? Like what's like the most common, like one or two things you're seeing?
I would say it's two things, and one of them has to do with the mindset, and the second has to do with the actual ability, the physical implementation, the literal implementation of the communication. So those two things are, number one, the story that people tell themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you see this a lot as well in your work.
Sure.
People get stuck to a certain narrative that they have. You know, oh, I've always been introverted. People just don't like me. You know, I'm always rejected. Whatever it is, whatever story they have, I'm not good enough. It's a story that they're attached to. That's the most common mindset issue that I see. But secondly, funnily enough, it's honestly the way that people carry themselves, which is why I don't just focus simply on the mindset. I focus on that, but also the practical implementation of communication.
Mm.
So when I say the way they carry themselves, I'm talking about their body language, their tonality, literally the way that they carry themselves and communicate with their body. Because if somebody, and of course, these two things relate, right?
Totally.
Absolutely, man. Like the mind and the body are connected. So somebody's story might perpetuate bad body language, and bad body language might perpetuate them repeating negative patterns in their mind. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's interesting that you said that too, because you know what I find is like, depending on what energy level they're in, or like what they're telling themselves from like a story perspective, like I'm not good enough, then they start to feel like the fear and the anxiety of not being good enough, or maybe shame, and like everything starts to move kind of almost like an inward spiral. Like they start to hunch, they put their head down, they're like their face and look kind of goes downwards. Like it's
Yeah.
all like the energy starts, and then it kind of flows into how they show up. So what is like the main thing you like focus on helping in on the first part? Like what are you doing to help them like shift their mindset, or like re-examine that story, or find a new
Yep.
story that fits better?
Yep. Great question. And it is the first thing. So even the way you ask the question is, you know, it's completely on track, because the first thing that all my clients go through, the first module actually, is called presence and energy, which is something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on as well, actually, because I know that you do a lot of that work. So the very first module is presence and energy, meaning two things. Number one, presence, literally the present moment, being here, being now. Right before you started recording the podcast, you know, quite eloquently explained how nature is a mirror, is a reflection to us, because nature is simply being. The trees are being, the birds are being, the flowers are being.
Mm-hmm.
Presence in that sense, the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
And we focus on that because that's where, first of all, reality is. And
Yep.
secondly, that's where you are most productive and most efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, and I'm not, when I say productive and efficient, those are very logical terms. I'm not necessarily talking about productive and efficient for work, for projects, but productive and efficient in handling your own emotions,
Yep.
because that's something that men struggle with. We think that when we suppress our emotions and, you know, clench our jaw, we we feel like we're avoiding the emotions, but a good friend of mine, Ryan McKelvey, actually, he said, avoidance is not detachment. So when we avoid something, we're basically handling those emotions not well. You're not avoiding it.
Yeah, it's
You're not
a
really,
it's funny you say it that way, because like in our minds we think like we're avoiding it, we're escaping it, right? But the reality is like you're actually feeding it and making it stronger, because of you're resisting it. You're like your
yeah.
unwillingness to look at it and be okay or be present with it is it actually sharpens it. It makes it like it makes it feel like a bigger monster, a bigger demon, um, than it has to be. It doesn't even have to be that.
Yeah, exactly. And the more you resist it, like you said, it just grows into a monster that you're eventually going to have to face anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. It's the funny part is like you eventually you're going to have to face it. There's like there's no running away. You can hide for a little while, but like you're gonna have to face it at some point.
Yeah. And it could get ugly if you don't face it soon.
Yep.
Like that's what happens, right? Whatever it is that you're resisting right now, for all the listeners, whatever it is that you're resisting, you're afraid of shining the light of awareness on. And really, the reason why it's difficult, Rules, as you know, is it's extremely vulnerable, right?
Yes.
To face that shadow, to face these ugly parts of ourselves that are insecure, are jealous, afraid, that are needy.
Yeah.
Any of these parts of ourselves are very, very ugly. And as ugly as they are, as ugly as they feel, they're the parts of you that probably need the most love.
Mm.
And now we're getting a little bit deeper into it, but
No, I mean
you know,
that's really well said. I mean, I'm with you. Yeah, go ahead and finish your thought. I don't want to cut you off. Sorry.
like, that's fine. I was just saying, awareness is one thing, and that's the first phase that I take my clients through, for
Mm.
example. But if you really want to transcend that and turn it into a vessel of enlightenment, essentially, enlighten a part of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you take it past acceptance and awareness. Sorry, it's from awareness to acceptance, and then to actually embracing it and loving that part of yourself. Now, this is easier said than done, obviously. In fact, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah. And it is, because there's like so much resistance, right? Like for those of you listening that are avoiding it, well, that's just one of the resistances that are there. And there are like many types of resistance that come up whenever you um, are resting more in your inner presence to like actually work through it. And I like what you said. It's very vulnerable. Most people they think they're afraid to show others who they really are, but they're more afraid to show themselves who they really are, or
Yeah,
they're more afraid to show that part of themselves and admit that like, oh shit, this part of me is actually extremely needy, and it's a part of me, or this part of me is like extremely hateful and resentful towards like my mom and dad, and like is jealous when my friends get like laid and I don't, and like kind of hates them or wants them not to get lit, right? Like these things, they're part of the consciousness. They're part of your entire full range of consciousness.
yeah,
And you know, um, it feels and looks ugly until you actually give that part of you what it needs. And that
yeah.
you're right. Like once it gets what it needs internally from that presence inside you, that's where actually transformation happens. And I know you know this because it sounds like this is a core part of your teaching in module 1 of your program. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. And you're spot on. It is, it is essential. And it's painful. It's the resistance, like you said. That resistance is what makes us feel vulnerable. And there's a beautiful art of an art form of really working with these emotions. And I just want to give this little practical tip to your listeners, hopefully, if anybody's struggling with this. And this is something which goes against a lot of toxic masculine ideas of dealing with your emotions, of just getting over it. It's like, okay, well, how do you truly get over it?
Mhm.
And this is a teaching that I learned from a teacher called John Wineland, who I saw on YouTube actually. So I just want to give him credit. And he basically says that when you are feeling any form of emotional turmoil, and you know, it could be the neediness, the insecurity, the fear, all those parts of us that we're resisting. What you want to do is you want to give it your own masculine container,
Mhm.
which means you basically allow it to be in a controlled way. Even if it means in that container, it is uncontrolled, it's out of control. But
Mhm.
your consciousness, your acceptance and awareness of it, the container, is what's holding you. So you're nurturing yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
And that's the least needy thing one can do. Imagine doing that for your own neediness.
Yeah.
What a way to transcend, right?
Yeah. No, that's extremely well said. Like it literally is like, it's like almost like putting that part of you in a safe room where it could be allowed to express and be exactly the way it is without any limits or conditions, right? And it's so interesting, because I teach like an emotional releasing process. I teach like 6 or 7 actually, but they all have some form of what you just described as like kind of the core basis of it, right? Whether it's like looking at it as like an inner child, or just simply allowing it, or ask like having a dialogue with it, in whatever shape, way, or form, you are literally creating a safe space for that part to be
Yeah.
vulnerable with you, your presence, and for you to like allow your presence to just shine its light and be like, it's okay. I still love you. I love you the way you are.
Yes.
It's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Exactly.
Right. And it's that process where that part of you like kind of like, instead of like crumpling up in a ball, like it starts to like open up. And that's what it actually feels like in the body too, experientially. It feels like, oh, something feels like it's opening inside me, or like it's like blossoming, right?
Oh yeah.
And what's interesting is like there's a lot of spiritual dating coaches and writers that almost express this in the same way, like when the feminine, or like your girlfriend or wife is like in her neediness or her anger, um you create that sense of presence and space for her,
Yeah.
and show her that while the way she's reacting is not like an acceptable behavior, you still pierce through it and love her anyway, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that allows her to like blossom into love as well, by being like, oh shit, he's not running away from me, he still loves me and sees me, right? And so
Yes.
it's funny how that inner way of like dealing with it is actually how it actually manifests externally in your relationships too, if you do it in a healthy way.
Well said. Really well said. That's beautiful, and that's exactly right. In fact, that's something that I really encourage my clients to consider, because the way that you deal with that internal noise, that is the same, that's feminine energy, right? It's the chaos, it's the noise. So the way that you deal with your own feminine energy, the container that you give it, is the same way that you're going to deal with your woman's,
Mm-hmm.
or with you, even with the world's, with your friends. So I think that's a really essential point that you touched on, Rose, because when we really take control and responsibility for our level of emotional well-being, we become more trustworthy and more capable to become a better boyfriend, husband, friend, teacher, brother,
Absolutely, man.
because we're taking care of ourselves first and foremost.
And I like the word you used there, was trust. And yeah, that's actually quite the key. It's like you create a sense of connection to your full range of emotion and consciousness, and like every part of you. And the personal mind tells you like, oh no, this is going to make us get rejected or hurt, or people are going to like laugh at us. But in reality, it actually creates greater connection and trust with everyone, because that you're okay with those parts of yourselves, they start to feel safer and okay when in your presence.
Yeah, Absolutely. It's owning it. Like the moment you own any part of yourself, it loses its power over you and you transcend it. It's like the way that I've experienced it personally and the way that most people would experience it is, let's say you have been avoiding a certain fear. Let's say it's neediness, okay? Let's say you've been avoiding the neediness for a while, and then all of a sudden you become very conscious of it, and then you practice. You sit down, you open your heart, you meditate, and you allow it to be, you give it that container, and you just allow it. You accept it, you love it, you embrace it. That doesn't mean you're never going to feel neediness again.
Mm-hmm.
What's changed is a couple of things. First of all, you've given it permission to be. So there's no longer resistance. And that's where presence comes into place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, it's no longer compulsive. It's in the realm of your awareness now, of your
Yep.
consciousness. So even if it does manifest again, it is not going to be as emotionally triggering as it once would have been in the past.
Yes. And that's really well said. And I think for anyone that's listening to this, like, I think a lot of people have this like expectation that like, oh, like, I'm going to get rid of my doubts. I'm going to get rid of my fears. I'm going to get rid of my neediness and insecurities. And like, it's not so much of a getting rid of, I would say, if more an integration of them. Where
Yes.
it feels like there's like this puzzle piece that's what you think you are, and these puzzle pieces that are like missing and out of the puzzle, and they feel like alone and separate and away from you. And this process of presence is like almost like guiding them back home into like the piece that's theirs to be integrated in. And like they may still feel that way occasionally here and there, and you're right, it goes down quite a bit and the intensity is a lot less. It's more so that your relationship changes to these parts of you to the point where you actually don't care when they come up. Like it's like, yeah, that's fine,
No.
that thing comes up, it's like whatever. And it,
Yeah.
because it doesn't bother you, your perceptions start to feel like it's not really present with, it's like not really there, it doesn't really have any power or hold over me anymore, right? It's just like, oh, it's just a thing that comes and goes here and there, right?
Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is, Rose. It's, you're not getting rid of it, you're simply changing your relationship to those parts of yourself. So I guess a good question for anybody to ask themselves would be, which part of myself do I have the worst relationship with?
Mm. I'm sure that'll that'll create a lot of avoidance for a lot of these people that are watching.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are brave enough and are willing to look at that, that would be a great place to start and actually welcome up and let yourself be present with that part, and create a little container for it to see how that helps you change your relationship to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Can I ask you, because this is a really important topic, right?
Mhm.
And the way that I encourage my clients to do it, the way that I do it is by, well, the main form would be through meditation. So through very proactive, setting a 20-minute timer, sitting down, getting into a meditative state, and then opening your heart and allowing yourself to feel whatever it is that you need to. That's
Mhm.
the main way. The second would be, for me, journaling everything that you feel.
Mhm.
So the question I have is, what practical ways of improving your relationship to those parts of yourself do you go through yourself or teach your clients?
Mm. The most important one I teach them is surrender, is letting go. And um, it, the way you described it, the presence, the open heart, and then the honesty, which is like the vulnerability part, is like
Yeah.
the core of the teaching that I do. And then I just have like variations of that, like 5 or 6 variations of that I teach that help with that. But I think the most important thing is the courage and willingness to start doing that, to start looking at those parts of you and embracing them. Because it, the first time you actually get that experience of like, wow, like I actually accepted that and it felt so much better, you start to create a contrast between like how you've been doing it and like this new way that suddenly feels like, wow, that felt really good. Actually, I feel like loved and accepted and connected to myself. And once you start that contrast of like, oh shit, there's another option. There's actually another option that I was not aware of. That's what starts to change. I think the reality is like, now I have a choice. Now it's not that I'm a victim anymore, but I actually have a choice. So like my recommendation is like, it's it starts from the very first time we talked to my client of mine. Is like, I get them on this through my intercom mastery course, and like I help them get these experiences like as soon as possible, so they start to see like, okay, there's another option for me that I wasn't aware of.
Gotcha.
But the ones that you talked about are pretty good, man. Like it's essentially like journaling, dialoguing with yourself, surrender, letting go, presence. Like these are all the key stuff. Like, and to be honest, like every method I've seen out there, and I've seen like dozens, they're all variations of the same thing. Like without the presence part, because the presence is like, you don't know what's true, but you do know that only right now exists. Like that's the most true of the true things you can say for certain. Like, well, I've never been to
This
the
is
future.
happening.
I can't tell whether any of these thoughts that come to my mind or any of these feelings or perceptions are true, but I can say that right now is all that I've ever experienced or exists that I am aware of. Like that's the only thing, right? And that's just letting yourself sit in that truth can help you release a lot of stuff, you know?
Yeah. I love it. I'm laughing because I know exactly what you mean. And for anybody that's experienced true presence or is experiencing true presence right now, you know how liberating a feeling it can be, right? It just brings a laughter to your heart. But yeah, absolutely. I like what you said a little earlier about the willingness and the courage, because it does take courage to do this work, and it does take a willingness. And without the willingness, it won't happen.
That's
It just
right. Like, it doesn't matter how good the coach is, right? Like, you could have the best coach in the world, but if those two aspects of your courage and willingness to like be like, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't know shit about shit. Maybe everything that I think and feel is complete fugazi. Maybe it's like there's no truth in it. And maybe I'm open-minded to the idea that it could be very different than what I know. If you have that open-mindedness, then you're in a space where you can be helped, and you're in a space where you're ready to take that next step in your life, right? But before that happens, right, I actually talk to a lot of people that like, when I'm pretty social as well, and when I'm like out, I meet a girl or meet somebody and they ask what I do, and I tell them a little about it. They get curious, but they also get super skeptical a lot of times, and they're like, they want a challenge. And like the first thing I say is like, hey, I'm not gonna have a debate with you, because I don't need to prove anything of whether this is right or wrong. Um, I'm happy to share if you're open-minded and willing to see it a different way, but I'm not here to like prove your reality wrong. If you're satisfied with your reality, cool, that's awesome. Like, you know, and it's the ones that are willing and open that are like, they actually can receive what I have to offer in that moment, and they actually experience something. They're like, okay, that felt correct, that felt right, and that's why it's so important before you get a coach, is like, make sure you're connected to them, and make sure you have a willingness or open-mindedness to like have it be completely very different than what you thought it was.
Yeah, true. Well said.
I'd love to understand more of like I know, because you mentioned there's two parts. You teach a very like, presence based, like letting go and helping someone to like get out of their heads and like start to like embrace more of acceptance in themselves. But the second part you also mentioned was like, there's also some practical things you actually teach and help these guys with. We'd love to hear like on the practical side of things, what's like the number one struggle, and like how do you help that?
Yeah, sure. So the number one struggle, without a doubt in my mind, would definitely be the body language and the breathing. So I would say, honestly, like maybe 90% of guys aren't breathing right, nor do they have the correct posture. Because with that simple tweak, and I have many clients that can attest to this, that have literally implemented this one module, which is body language and tonality. And after a week, they've seen and experienced a difference in the way that they feel, in the way that people treat them, in the respect that they get from people, and in their interactions overall. Because it doesn't matter how present and powerful and confident and loving you feel in your mind, if your body language is trash, that is what people see. The way that I describe it is your body is your game piece in life, right? Like it's like when you play a video game and you go through the different avatars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You make your judgment based off what you see, based off the weapons and the armor and all that. And essentially, this is the armor that we have in life. You know, our tongue is the weapon that we have, and a weapon of love, I like to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be
Love.
of as well. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And essentially, if one can really master the fundamentals of good body language, that alone will help them tremendously in the way that they communicate. Tremendously. And it's for the same reason why before meetings, I mean, before this podcast, before my client meetings, I'm usually standing up, I'm in a power pose, I'm breathing deep into my lower belly, right into the lower belly, and speaking from that place as well. It's been proven from multiple studies. I think it was Chicago University, where they did an experiment with a number of people who stood in a power pose. Either they had their hands on their hips, standing up, or they were leaning back in a chair with their hands behind their head. After about 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, Rose, their testosterone went up by like 40% or something. It was something ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, like they tracked it. They actually tracked it. And what's associated with testosterone? It's confidence, it's aggression, it's more energy. And that's essentially what creates, you know, dopamine as well. Serotonin rather, more long term. So if you can master basic good body language skills, that will change the way that you communicate. Apart from that, the breathing again is extremely important, because not only is it useful in how you sound, you know, the vocal projection, but how deep you're breathing will determine how you feel. Because as we know, I mean, if I were to ask you, when somebody's very nervous and anxious, what's their breathing like?
Yeah, it's like shorter, a bit panicky. It's like they don't get
Exactly.
very deep inside them, right?
That's right. Exactly. It's panicky, it's short, and it's shallow. So that is if that is the physiological response of anxiety and nerves. And we know that the mind and the body are connected. With that information in mind, what would happen if we change our biology, if we change the physiology and start to breathe deep, even if we feel nervous, if we start breathing deep into our lower belly, and whoever's listening to this podcast or watching the video can do it right now as we're talking, just start breathing deep into your lower belly, slowly in a relaxed manner. What happens after a few breaths, doesn't take long at all, your heart rate slows down. You can test this. If you have an Apple Watch, you can check the heartbeat monitor, or you can use your hands to actually check your heart rate. When you breathe deep and slowly, your heart rate slows down. Increased heart rate is another symptom of anxiety. So you're literally hacking the mind, you're biohacking yourself to feel more confident using your body language and using your breath.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. I was like actually like just doing the deep breathing myself as you were talking, and I was like, oh yeah, I noticed like a greater sense of ease inside myself, a bit more calmness as I started to do that. So Yeah, for those of you guys listening to it, like, and you want to increase your testosterone, hey, before you go out, if you're gonna go talk to some girls or go on a date, maybe get into that power pose and a couple minutes of deep breathing, and then
Oh yeah.
you show up a little more power and confidence on your little adventure. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Shako, if someone wanted to work with you, do you mostly do like group programs, one-on-one mentoring? What's it look like to work with you? Like, do you, yeah, what's the kind of the style of like mentoring that you offer?
Sure. So I do have, well, first of all, thanks for asking. And I do have a couple of different packages. So it is tailored depending on the person and their requirements as well. But the main program is called Diamond Eye. So Diamond Eye 2.0, and it's a really beautiful community of men where we meet twice a week and we have conversations about all these topics, be it emotional intelligence, social intelligence, communication, confidence. And we keep each other accountable. It's extremely supportive. And every week I come with new content, with new teachings, and there's a lot of, not only is there a lot of support, but there's a lot of accountability and encouragement in the group as well. Plus, of course, you get direct support from me as a coach and as a mentor and friend. However, I do also have a private one-on-one extended coaching service available as well.
Awesome, man. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be like the best way for them to do that so they can see if that's a good fit for them?
Yeah, cool. So Shako T Lokman, you can probably see the spelling. I'm sure you'll put it in or maybe even tag me. It was
I
so
will.
on Facebook. Yeah, I think Facebook would be the easiest, Shako T Lokman, or on Instagram at Shako T Lokman. And if you do reach out to me after hearing this, let me know that you came from Rules, and I'll definitely sort you out and help you out there.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Awesome, man. I really enjoyed your energy, and I enjoyed a lot of what you said. I felt a lot of alignment, and I when I find people for the podcast, I usually like kind of scope out who's out there posting good content, and that's how I even found you, and thought like, okay, this guy has some value to offer. So I'm really grateful you came and joined. And for those of you guys watching as well, um, I also just recently released a free training guide called 5 Steps to Embodying Boundless Confidence and Self-Love. I'll also put a link to that alongside a tag to Shako's Facebook. So if you guys are interested, check them out. If you're interested in that free training guide, the link will be down below so you can check that out as well. Thank you so much for joining me, brother. I really appreciate your wisdom and your energy, man.
Rose, I am honored to be here. It's been a pleasure conversing with you, and I just want to acknowledge and express my appreciation for the space that you're holding on your corner of the internet as well. It truly is beautiful. So thank you for having me.
For sure, brother. Thank you, man. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys next time on the Boundless Embodiment podcast. Peace.